Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm Nancy Nyland, the Special Events Coordinator for Lake Oswego Reads, and I am very pleased to see all of you here this evening. We're in for a great presentation. None of these presentations could happen without the generous support of the Friends of Lake Oswego Library, as well as Lake Oswego Review, the City of Lake Oswego, as well as Lake Oswego Rotary. So we're grateful for them. If you have any interest in joining the Friends, you can see me afterwards. We make it very easy. We also get great support from our Library Advisory Board. So we've got a member here this evening. Thank you for coming. For this evening, we want to pay great attention to our Deputy Fire Marshal. So if you wouldn't mind silencing your cell phones. Thank you so much. So our Deputy Fire Marshal, Dave Smith, has been at this since he was a toddler, because he told me he's been doing this for over 25 years. So clearly, practically starting it in the womb. And he has been with the City of Lake Oswego for over 13 years. So we are in good hands this evening as he is discussing some basics of community emergency response. So without further ado, I will hand it over to David Smith.
Thank you. As Nancy mentioned, my name is David Smith. I'm a Deputy Fire Marshal with Lake Oswego Fire. I have been the program manager for our CERT program, which I'll talk a little bit about in a moment. I'll just kind of give you a little bit of an overview, because folks are like, well, what is it that you do for work? So as a Deputy Fire Marshal, I've got kind of 3 different things that I focus on. One of which is inspections. So we do inspections of new buildings. We look at the fire sprinklers, fire alarm systems. We do inspections of existing buildings, kind of some of the more complex ones. Also do fire investigations. So if there is a fire in the community and it's not readily apparent for our engine crews or fire crews, they can request a fire investigator, and then we'll come out and do the fire cause, origin, and things. And then the other one is public education, and kind of the CERT program falls into the public education, but that includes visits to schools, visits to neighborhood associations, and kind of just being able to get out to the public and talking and sharing information. So this is really the fun part. This is the part that I really enjoy doing. So I'm hoping I do not have any slides. Didn't bring a computer because we're all technologied out by the end of the day. So I really want to have this be kind of a good dialogue and discussion, lots of great questions. So I will actually start with a couple questions for you all. What are the things that you're hoping to get out of this evening? Because I can talk for hours upon hours upon hours, but if it's not what you need to hear, then it doesn't do us any good. Okay. Great question, and we can hit on that. We can hit on that because I've talked with folks that live in apartments, condominiums, and a whole bunch of stuff, and it gets very, very challenging. All right, what else? That I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Can you elaborate just a little bit more? No. Nope. As you said, was for the school for the whom? Okay, so I know that the Guide Dogs for the Blind do come into the fire station, but I think it's more just they visit the fire station for socialization and to get them kind of familiar with. But that's the only involvement that I'm aware that we've had. Yeah. Nope. All right. What else? What do we? Okay. Awesome. Yeah. No, and that's a big topic. That's a big topic that I've been working on for about 4 or 5 years now. So communication, that's key. All right, and anything else? Sure. If you have your water and food, because we'll come back, and that's a great place to start, right? Is kind of talking about some of the preparation stuff. And also, before we get to those, let me talk about CERT and what CERT is. So, Community Emergency Response Teams or Training. So this is actually a FEMA program. This came about back in the mid 1990s. There was an earthquake down in Mexico, and some of the folks from Southern California, LA County Fire, they were watching all of these events unfold in Mexico, and what they found or what they observed was there was a limited number of casualties that occurred during the earthquake. There was a much higher number of casualties that occurred after the earthquake from folks trying to rescue the injured. And they went, hey, wait a minute, that's a big problem. So what can we do? So they actually developed a training program to kind of help educate the community on what resources were available, how to use those resources, and what you're capable of doing as kind of essentially, kind of a volunteer, right? And what happened over the years is that FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, they looked at that program and went, hey, this needs to be expanded and put into a much larger program. So the CERT program is actually a 24-hour class. In fact, actually, we offer the class twice a year, once in the spring, once in the fall. Our spring session is starting actually next Tuesday night. It is already full. We've got 30 folks. It's, I think the wait list, it's always kind of one of those things. We've got a wait list, and then we send the email out saying, hey, you're on the wait list. The class is going to be starting on such and such. Here's the dates. If you can attend, we'd love to have you. Sign up quick because it's going to fill up. And it generally does. But basically what we go through is it's about 7 weeks. We have 3-hour evening sessions and a 1 3-hour Saturday session. It starts off, usually the first night, we cover 2 of the modules. We cover disaster psychology to try to talk about what are the impacts, what are the things that you may see, experience, and have to deal with during a major disaster. And then we also talk about terrorism and responses to terrorism. And that's basically, there's nothing that you're going to do. There's really nothing that, we can do even from a fire entity in some of these large cases because it's going to just require so many resources, right? So that's kind of the first night. The other thing we talk about is and this is a question that I pose to every class on the first night. How many firefighters do we have on duty in the city of Lake Oswego on a 24-hour period? Take a guess. If you don't know, take a guess. If you know, hang on. Come on, give me a guess. 20. 30. 10. 12. Oh, you were so close. Yes. If we don't include our battalion chief, it's 12. If we include the battalion chief, which is on a 24-hour shift, so we have 4 fire stations, right? There's 1 fire station kind of in the 4 quadrants around the lake. So our downtown fire station over here, 300B Ave, is 3 firefighters, and then also 1 battalion chief. All of the other 3 fire stations have 3 fire stations. So what's our population of the city, right? And you all can kind of look at the picture and go, okay, 13 firefighters during a major disaster. And when we look at the CERT program, this was really developed for earthquake preparedness, right? Major earthquake. The Cascadia subduction is kind of the buzzword that we all hear. It's kind of like I always ask, okay, 13 firefighters. Well, when is this going to happen? We don't know, obviously, but what time of day should something happen? Is it nighttime? Is it during the school year? Is it during the day? Is it a weekday? And if we look at, let's say, our Westlake Fire Station, how many schools are fairly close to there? Actually, we could even look at our Jean Road Fire Station across from Lake Ridge Middle School. And then you've got the elementary school, right? So where do they go? Who do they prioritize, right? And I kind of tell the average homeowner, be prepared. Because you may see them drive by, you might flag them down, you might say, hey, we have a problem, and they're going to go, okay, thank you very much. We're going to make a note of that because we're going to go around and we have to prioritize and basically try to identify where are the biggest issues that we need to deal with first, And then we're going to put together a list because we might pull resources from half of the city to the other half because that's where everything's concentrated, and we're going to focus our resources there. Because our goal, not only in CERT, but for us, is to do the greatest good for the greatest number. Okay? So that's kind of the first night. The second night, and the topics kind of vary. It just sort of depends on the night and the speakers. I bring in some of our fire department staff to kind of help teach. We have 2 nights of, we call it medical operations. So medical operations, MedOps 1. We actually talk about, some of the different injuries and things that you might see. We talk about setting up a medical treatment area. How do you do that? What's the priority? How do we triage victims, right? So if we're in here and cabinets, which, should be secured, but if stuff's falling down and you're in here and you go through and you're like, okay, how do we triage people? How do we figure out who's hurt? Well, it's simple. If you can hear me and you want to survive, walk to the sound of my voice, right? If I have a sprained ankle and I come hobbling out, guess what? You're what we call a green, right? You're a walking wounded. You have value to me because if I need help with somebody that has a more major priority issue where we have to hold, a bandage on something and your hands work, guess what? We're going to put you to work, right? So we talk about some of the medical stuff. And then we also talk about how to move victims, when you can move them, okay, and the safe way to do it. And it's all based on what your physical limitations and capabilities are. Some folks can, some folks can't. That's okay. Remember the first night we talked about disaster psychology? There are going to be, or there could potentially be, some people that you are unable to help. So we talk about, what are some of those emotions and things that you may have to go through. So back to the MedOps 1, like I said, we talk about triaging victims, we talk about relocating or basically moving them, setting up a medical treatment area. And you're probably thinking in your mind, like, a medical treatment area, Dave, how are we going to do that? Where would we do that? Totally depends. If you've watched the news or you've watched the media coverage of any of these other major disasters, it could be in your garage. If your garage and your house is still standing and some of your neighbors' houses are not, well, guess what? You could potentially bring them into your garage, and that might become a medical treatment area, right, for folks in your neighborhood. Again, you're trying to do the best you can with the resources, the limited resources that you have. And when I say limited, let's kind of do a little bit of an exercise. We won't talk about the price of fuel at the moment, but in the event of a natural disaster, okay, let's consider just the earthquake scenario. How does our fuel reach us? Trucks. And what do those trucks go over every single day? Bridges. Yeah, you guys are catching on. Okay. Where do those come into Portland? How many different routes are there into Portland? 3, north, south, and from the east, right? Maybe from the west if we consider the Columbia River and they come up the river by barges, but what do those barges have to go under? Bridge. So if the bridges collapse or fail, is that going to have an impact on our capabilities and the resources that are available? 100%. Yep. So now you start to kind of think about, okay, well, if we don't have fuel coming in, what do we do, right? So those are some of those things that we kind of talk a little bit about during the class. In the second night of medical operations, we talk about more specific injuries that you might see. So the triage part in the first night, it is what we call rapid triage. It takes 60 seconds or less, hopefully less, right? If you can hear me and you can walk to the sound of my voice, great, you're green. If I walk up to somebody and I'm looking at them and it doesn't look like they're breathing, I'm going to kind of open their airway once. Do they start breathing on their own? No. Once again, no, they're probably not going to make it, and I move on, right? And that is a hard thing for folks to understand. We are not doing treatment. And folks always ask me, well, do you cover CPR? Do you cover the use of the AED? We do not cover those or that training in the CERT class. Because think about this. Are we coming to help you right away? Nope. And if you start to do chest compressions, how long are you going to be able to do chest compressions on somebody? not very long, right? So it's kind of one of those things. That is why we don't cover those particular topics in our CERT class. We always encourage folks to go know it, go learn it. We do hands-only CPR training all the time. It's a wonderful thing. There was actually just a Bruce Springsteen concert. You know, somebody collapsed in the crowd. 2 folks there did CPR, and the person, I think it was a success story, right? So knowing that is great in the right environment. Again, we're talking just disasters, right? Major disaster, earthquake. So the second night we talk about some of the treatment of wounds. Again, it's basic. It's basic first aid. We elevate, we apply pressure, you know, to bleeds and things of that nature. But that's kind of the second night of the medical operations. Then we have another night where we talk about team organization. How many of you have ever watched, you know, some of the media coverage of these giant wildland conflagrations, and you're going, how the heck do they know where folks are? Right? They've got all these resources coming in. We use a program, or kind of a structure called the Incident Command System. It's actually kind of developed through the military and Cal Fire. So the forestry folks down in California, they actually developed this system many, many decades ago, and it's now a model for organizing it. Basically, it's a simple structure. There is somebody in charge. There's always one person. You might not like that person that's in charge, but if they're in charge, great. That's who it is. And then we have some other roles. Operations, they're kind of on the boots on the ground. They're the doers. And then you have logistics. They get the supplies for the ops folks. Then you have the planning. Planning folks are kind of thinking, okay, what's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen the next day? What's the weather today? Does our weather here change? Is it variable? Yeah, so planning folks start thinking about, hey, tomorrow or the next day, we might need to worry about some shelter. We might need to worry about, you know, other resources. You know, what are the things that we might need, and they're kind of planning it. There's a finance section, and that's not anything that folks would see, you know, in a CERT role, but tracking, documentation, keeping notes, scribes, having a liaison. Essentially, it's so that way if something happens in your neighborhood, and some of the neighborhood associations, if you have not spoken to your neighborhood association management or officers or whatever it is that they call, go get a hold of them. Many of the neighborhood associations have done a tremendous job already of creating, actually many of the neighborhood associations have an emergency response group or a committee. Some of them actually have supplies, equipment supplies and caches that actually, you know, it's basically this, but a lot more in volume. I'll go through this in a moment. But they'll actually go through, and they've got kind of a plan for their neighborhood. So they're already kind of putting some things in place of like, hey, if this happens, these are the folks, you know, where we can go to. These are the things where different supplies and stuff are located. Right? So again, get a hold of you and talk with your neighborhood leaders. And some of the neighborhood associations are definitely more active than the others. And if yours isn't active, now's your chance, right? You can take that role. All right, so the 2 nights of medical operations, the night of team organization, then we actually spend a night on fire safety and building utilities. So we kind of joke that we're going to dance with the devil. We have live fire, use fire extinguishers, put fires out. We talk about power, the power lines, the power grid that's outside of our home. We talk about, you know, we have pictures of houses that have damage. Okay, what are the things you need to understand? Knowing where some of the valves and control stuffs are in your home, right? How many of you know where the main water shutoff is for your home? A few? Good, good. Is it labeled? Right? Having it labeled is important. Knowing electrical breaker, having the electrical breakers labeled so you know what portion of the house they go are. So if you have to isolate a problem, you can isolate it without having to shut the whole house off. Actually, I'm trying to remember, it wasn't I think 2 or 3 classes ago, actually, we were talking that particular night. I had a student come up and like, I feel so silly. I said, well, why is that? She goes, we had a problem with our hot water heater, and we shut off, you know, the main outside, not knowing we shut the water off to the whole house. If we had known, we could have just shut off the hot water heater and stayed at the house with cold water and not having gone and got a hotel for a couple of days, right? So a lot of important information that we share on the building side. Then we get into search and rescue. So we have a night where we go through, okay, how do we categorize buildings? There's low damage, moderate damage, and high damage. So a building that has low damage would be safe for you to go into, utilize, stay in, and not have really any immediate concerns or worries. Medium damage buildings, those are buildings that, hey, if we know that there's somebody in there as a possible victim, we're going to go in and we're going to do a search. We teach you how to do that search. We call it right hand or left hand. If I come in, I'm always going to go to the right. I keep my hand on the wall. I can have a partner. That way we can swing out a little bit wider. They can use a piece of rope or webbing. We go through, basically how and when to do that, and then also show some examples of high damage. And we say, hey, that's a no-go. That's not even something necessarily that we as the fire department are going to go into, because it's probably going to require a technical response team, a lot of heavy equipment, and wood and shoring and everything else to make it safe to be able to go in. Those are the ones that you just have to kind of go, there's nothing we can do. So those are some of the things that we cover on the search and rescue. Along the way, we kind of share a lot of information. We've had a lot of great students with different backgrounds. And it's always good just for kind of networking. So there is definitely a day where there's a lot of hands-on skills. We go over, how to shut off gas meters, water meters. We have that stuff available just so that way folks can kind of see it and at least be aware of what it looks like and stuff. So any questions so far? Correct, yeah. So they will. No, we don't. We don't. Nope. Yeah. So great question. So, and that's one that comes up quite a bit is with the gas meters, right? Everyone's like, oh, I need to have, and I probably have one in here. Before I go digging in this, this is kind of a go kit, right? 72-hour kit. This has a whole bunch of supplies. I've got helmet, vest, some first aid supplies, gloves, duct tape, water, masks. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. I'm not going to spend the time going through all of this. I have there is a 1 hour video. If you go to just search Lake Oswego CERT, there's a page, and on that CERT page, actually you might have to do emergency communications, but I have a 1 hour video that goes through everything in this bag and what it would be used for. So very, very in-depth. I also have a 1 hour video, which the zipper apparently decided to break on this, talking about FRS radios. And I'll talk about the radios in a moment, but there's a 1 hour video on me and the camera here going through every mode. These are actually in a lot of the neighborhoods through a city grant program actually purchased. I don't know how many that are out there, but there's a lot. So some of the neighborhoods actually have a cache of radios available, which gets us back to the communication. So don't let me forget about that. But back to the gas meter, right? This is a 4-in-1 multi-tool. You do not need something fancy like this. I've had folks say, well, do I need a non-sparking tool? If you need a non-sparking tool, you should not be in the environment. Make sense, right? Big boom, right? We don't want to be there. But if you do smell gas and it's in your home and you have the ability to shut off the meter, sure, go ahead. But yes, you do not have the ability, or you're not supposed to turn it back on. You now have to wait for Northwest Natural, which goes back to the issue they had in California years ago. Earthquake happened, everyone ran out and shut off their gas meters. Well, some of them waited months before the gas company had an opportunity to get all the way around and start turning these back on. So if you do not smell gas, do not shut off your gas meter. You may also see, if you know the gas meters and you've heard of these earthquake valves, there's a couple of different styles. The most common one that I've seen up here is if you're looking at a gas meter, there's a little red kind of unit that sits on top of it. What happens is when the earth starts moving and shaking, there's a little ball bearing that falls in and it stops the flow of gas. Northwest Natural is neutral on the installation of those. They neither recommend nor say don't do that. The reason is that device is downstream of the meter. That is not their problem. If it shakes and rattles and rolls, that is on you as the property owner or the owner to have that reset. That they won't reset. So, and I've actually talked with a couple of the technicians about that. So this is just kind of one of those things. So I have a lot of folks like, oh, should I get one of those earthquake valves? Well, you can. You'll pay a plumber to do the work. But if it trips, you will have to pay someone to come out unless it's not that hard to reset, but you have to understand why did it reset and, you know, do I have a leak further down? Let's see. So anyways, we have 1 hour video on this, 1 hour video on this. Like I said, the CERT class, it's 24 hours. It's a great class. I have met some amazing people in the community through that. You know, and it's awesome. You know, actually I was in the airport in Orlando yesterday getting on a plane, and somebody coming off had just recently gone through one of the classes. So it's, you know, you never know where you're gonna run into folks. So any other questions before I move on and get to the things? All right. Well, they may not be able to. If the bridges are down, they may not be able to. And that actually leads me right into my next topic, so I'm glad, right? So we've got, this is a 72-hour kit. When I started here in Lake Oswego, like Nancy had mentioned, I've been doing this a long time. I started in the fire service in 1991. I've been in the Pacific Northwest now for over 25 years. And when I started, the big thing was 72-hour kit. Well, here's 72 hours of water. If you need to do something a little bit more fancy, you can go with a water bottle and water filter. There's some more stuff inside there where you can filter the water. However, the new thinking and the new educational messages are what we call be 2 weeks ready. 2 weeks, right? We talked about the bridges, and I brought up the example with the fuel, you know, intentionally. Because if we can't get fuel in, there's only a limited amount of resources and things that we can do, right? So anticipate being on your own for 2 weeks. And we've only talked about earthquake preparedness, right? What are the other natural disasters that we could potentially have in the region? Wildfire, okay, go bag, right? A little different, but what else? Floods, have we had those here? 1996, right? Yep. What else? Ice storm. Yeah. And that's going to bring me back to the communications, right? What were the problems that we had during the ice storm? Down trees. How long did you lose your electricity for? 4 days. Anybody more than that? How long? 3 weeks. I've had a couple of folks that were kind of Clackamas, Oregon City, that well over 14 days, right? What else? Water pipes freezing, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, couldn't get in. Yeah. Okay. Did these work? You were pretty quick with that answer. You're like, no, my cell phone didn't work. So the big thing that I found out during a couple of, we've had really 2 major ice storms, windstorms. Some of the cell phone towers, they have about 6 hours of battery. Manufacturers in the cell tower, they kind of know that's an issue, because I've actually seen now, and I've been involved with the construction of actually portable, you know, not portable, they're big generators, you know, the tank is the size of the table and, you know, to the ground. So they realize they cannot have those outages, you know, so they're trying to make their systems a little bit more resilient in the area. But if you don't have cell phone, now what do you do, right? How do you get organized and how do you communicate? And that's going to kind of lead me into the discussion on the radio. So this is what we call an FRS radio. It stands for Family Radio Service. You do not need a license to operate these. Okay. In fact, when after one of the ice storms, I had a couple of the radio folks come to me. We were talking, and I went home and I went, I have like 11 of these in my garage. If your kids ever had the Disney Princess on Ice, G.I. Joe, whatever, you know, the kids, that's what these are, Family Radio Service. So you do not need a license to operate these. These particular ones, this is a Motorola, what they call the T600 model. I don't want to geek out on the model or anything. These go for roughly about $100 for two, $100 a pair. Batteries are rechargeable or alkaline. So you can take the battery compartment off and put alkaline batteries in. I think these are AA, or leave the rechargeable in. You can plug it in and recharge it, which now brings us to another issue. Power, right? We have no power. What do? Those little solar chargers, they're great, right? Those are really good to have because that would actually recharge something like this, or you have a large amount of batteries, which brings us back to the storage issue, right? Where do I store all this stuff? We'll get there. So theoretically, well, it's not theoretically. The manufacturers will say these have a 36-mile range. They do not. They do not. If I were to take this and try to talk with somebody 2 blocks away from inside the building, it's going to be very, very challenging. You need to go outside, right? These work on what they call line of sight. So you have to have a good, clear line of sight between radios with no obstructions. The more obstructions you put in between, trees, buildings, hills, terrain, the less they're going to work. If you're in a newer building, what are we doing with the design of newer buildings? What are we trying to make them be? More efficient. How do we do that? Well, we block out all of this stuff from the outside. Well, when we block out the sun, it prevents these from going out. How many times have you walked into a building, you're like, my cell phone, I'm down to 1 bar. Yeah, it's the same exact theory, right? It's just, they work on radio waves. They work on the same thing. They're just a little different in what the frequencies are. So you've got to be outside. And sometimes you might have to move 6 feet. Now, we've done a lot of testing on these. I have been at our Westlake fire station, and we had actually folks driving all around Mountain Park and Oak Creek and Waluga, and we were able to communicate to East Waluga Park, West Waluga Park during the spring with no foliage on the trees. I've used these from our downtown fire station. You can go up, dozen blocks or so. So close proximity. If I want to communicate with my neighbors, perfect, right? Across the street. During a time where you've got no power, no heat, and you just want to check on your neighbor, and you have a set time, you turn it on, you have a prearranged time period, you turn it on, hey, are you doing okay? Yeah, it's cold. Got blankets? Gonna make it? All right, well, we'll check on you in an hour or 2 hours. It's perfect for communications within a neighborhood. Perfect. And in some cases, depending on where you are, if you live up on the top of, Mountain Park and you're up high on the hill, your radio coverage works a whole lot better. There was actually a story back in the 90s. Hiker up on Mount Hood fell, got hurt. He had a FRS radio. He ended up talking to some kid playing in his playground backyard on the swing set in Beaverton. Guy's like, hey, could you get your mom? Call 911 for me, please. So again, they're fairly, they're good for what they are. Yes. All right. So in the handouts, there is a map that I shared. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So there's a map that looks like this, and on the back is a whole bunch of tables and numbers, and you're probably like, oh my gosh, what does this all mean? And I have done a 2-hour and a 3-hour class just on this, so I'm going to go through this really, really fast. This radio has 22 possible channels. okay? The channels is no different than when you get in your car and you know, the older cars, you turn the dial, you're like, okay, I'm at 101.1 and I hold, you know, number 3, right? So number 3 is 101.1, that's the frequency, right? You're following me so far. So these work the same way. Channel 1 is a set frequency. It's set by the FCC. There's nothing you can do to change that. So in that table, you will see channel 1, and then the third column shows 2 watts. This has a maximum output power of 2 watts. And you're like, what does that mean? Don't worry about it. Just understand high power is 2 watts. It's not a whole lot, okay? Channels 1 through 7, 2 watts on high power. Channels 8 through 14, this will not let you transmit at anything less or anything more than 0.5 watts. So it's not much. That's literally going across the street. That's about it. That's about as far as you're going to talk. So folks will be like, oh, I was using these radios. They don't work. Well, what channel were you on? 11. I'm like, yeah, it's only a half a watt. It's not going to work for more than a few hundred feet, you know. Channels 15 through 22, you can bounce back up to high power. Again, I have a 1-hour video that goes through all of this stuff. It talks about the channels and privacy codes and a whole bunch of other stuff. If you search Lake Oswego emergency communication, you'll see I have a whole page dedicated to just radio information. Now, if you go back to the other page on the front, the map, what you can do is after one of the earlier ice storms, we had a group of stakeholders come together. And we said, hey, it'd be great to have a pre-designated channel for each of the neighborhoods so that I know this is the channel. What channel do I start out on? Because there's 22. Well, guess what? We figured it out for you. There's a channel and a privacy code. That relates to the big number and the little number on the radio, and I won't have time to go into that tonight. But it gives you a starting point. What time and when do I turn it on? That's up for you and your neighborhood to figure out. Right? Because that's just really kind of or maybe it's just you and a couple of your best neighbors. The most recent CERT class, there were some folks in South Shore that they called it Dad Patrol. They literally went out and they just started, there was 6 or 7 of them, and they started going out and they just started knocking on doors. They're like, hey, how are you doing? Are you doing okay? Is there anything that you need? And you know, they were collecting resources, sharing resources, and connecting people. And then he's like, man, I wish we had known about the radios because I had got a dozen of them in my garage with the kids, right? So it's kind of one of those things that we've been trying to kind of push that out there. But how, again, this is something for you. Now, we will not be monitoring these. I mean, if I grab my fire department radio, it's the same color, but they work on completely different frequencies. This is for you to connect at the local level. During the ice storm, what I saw was on Facebook, right? I'm not going to pick on anybody, but you post, hey, I'm cold, I've got a fireplace, but unprepared, I don't have any firewood. Anybody have firewood, right? And you see the post and you're like, yeah, I got tons of firewood, but I have an electric car and it's not charged and I can't help you get it there. And you see the post and you're like, man, I've spent too much time with my family, I got to get out of the house. All-wheel drive vehicle, you tell me where to pick it up and where to drop it off, right? I mean, that's the Facebook groups, right? That's what we're trying to set up with that map, the channel plan, and the radios. Solve the problems at the lowest level. That way we don't have to necessarily come in and help you with those. Does that make sense? All right. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about, because you're probably looking at, well, what's this other stuff you brought, Dave? Right? And what I've got here is 2 different radios. They literally look exactly the same other than the fact of the label that's on the top, the manufacturer's labels. Otherwise, these are pretty much identical, but they're not. All right, this is what we call a GMRS radio. It actually has an antenna, just like that one. I just happened to take it off and I've connected it to this antenna. This is a magnet. This has to be attached to something metal. Cookie sheet, you know, it's that one cookie sheet that's been in a cabinet way too long. You can't clean, right? You just throw this on there. It's got 15-foot cord. Throw this out on the back patio, and then you can sit inside. Because remember, I said this isn't going to work too well inside, but you go outside. Well, guess what? Let's just put the antenna outside. And if you notice, the size of the antenna provides a lot better signal reception and so forth. Now the GMRS radio, if we go back to that map, flip to the back page, that next column over, so GMRS radios, these share These share the same exact 22 channels as this one. Now, these are a little bit more difficult, I shouldn't say difficult, but it takes a little bit more time to program a GMRS radio. You also need to have a license to operate a GMRS radio, okay? Now, the cool part is you don't have to take a test. It's not amateur radio. This is GMRS, it's General Mobile Radio Service. Basically, you pay a $35 fee to the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. They issue you a license. Again, there's no test. The test is really just navigating the FCC's websites. There's two parts to it. One, you have to create an account, and then the other one is you have to pay. And then within 24 hours, they issue you a call sign, which you are required to utilize when using the radio. You have to identify yourself using your GMRS issued call sign. The cool part is that that call sign is good for not only you, but your entire immediate family, brothers, sisters, spouse, in-laws. If you wanted to go nieces and nephews, I don't know if it goes that far, but essentially everybody in your immediate family can share that call sign. Correct. It is assigned to you. Yeah, you can't ask or request a certain one. Yeah, it's 4 letters followed by 3 numbers. So, for instance, mine is WRKT697. That is my GMRS call sign. Now, you're probably like, okay, well, I've got $100 for 2 of these. This one's a little bit more expensive. This one's about $70. I've seen some other GMRS handhelds like this for 25 bucks. So you can get 2 GMRS radios for 50 bucks, plus the $35 fee at $85, okay? And now think of the range, because let's go to that 4th column. Channels 1 through 7, the output power of this is 5 watts, more than double of the FRS radio. 8 through 14, you're still limited to a half a watt. And then channels 15 through 22, 50 watts, 50. That is not a typo. You can actually get a big, giant radio that looks, the face of it's about this big, it's about this thick, this deep, and it weighs about 10 pounds because it's all metal, because it acts as a heat sink. And then you can connect it to a radio like this or an antenna like this. You can actually put it on a 20-foot flagpole and put it up a little bit higher. But 50 watts provides a lot more coverage. So for example, I live up in Clark County, and on a good day, using a 50 watt radio, I can talk with somebody that's on that side looking north of Mountain Park. Not downtown, because they're down in a hole, right? It's the line of sight. But 50 watts, I can communicate, in that distance. Now you'll see down on the bottom, there's some additional channels, and they can be either channels 23 through 30, sometimes it's 15R through 22R, sometimes it's repeater 1 through repeater 2, because remember I said these radios work via what? Line of sight, okay? Well, if I put a giant mountain in between or a massive hole, is that going to work? No, but what could I do? I could put somebody at the top of the mountain to act as a relay. So this person talks to this person talks to that, they relay the message, and then it comes back and forth. Some awesome people over in Mountain Park near Condoleezza, they actually figured out using FRS radios how and where to station folks to communicate to get a message to the Westlake Fire Station or Westlake Park. They knew all of the relay locations, right? So it can be done. Is it a pain? Yes, because when we went to do one of the trainings, we had one person that didn't show up. We didn't know they weren't going to show up, and of course nothing worked, right? Because we needed that person. Now, what if instead of having somebody standing up here, I put a radio that repeats it automatically? That's what we call a repeater, okay? Basically what happens is this person transmits on a repeater-capable radio. It transmits on one frequency going into the radio, and simultaneously The repeater is retransmitting that same voice out on a different frequency, which this person hears, okay? Now with radios are not like, you know, when we get 2 or 3 people even here in the room, right? It's gonna be whoever has the loudest voice wins. In radio, only one person gets the airwave at a time, and it's usually the most powerful radio. So that's kind of one of the things to kind of understand. So if we have a repeater, which there is a repeater for GMRS capable radios, which is one of the benefits of having a license or GMRS license, is you get to use repeater capable radios. That's what these are. So with that in mind, with this person, let's say in an FRS radio and this person here, if this person wanted to talk to this person, they wouldn't be able to do it because of the mountain. But if this person communicated with this person on one channel, and then this person switched to the repeater channel, then they can now talk to a much wider area, okay? That's what those other channels are that are on that table. The 50, and there are 50 watts as well, so 23 through 30, those are repeater channels. That's why the FRS column, the third column, there's nothing there. But anyway, so that's a GMRS repeater. There are many, many GMRS repeaters that are popping up in the Portland area. There's a couple really good ones. We have one here in LO. Milwaukee has one. And just for, again, comparison, Battleground, I can connect to the repeater here in LO and talk to somebody in South Salem, right? So now I am not using one of these radios though, but it can be done if you have the right height and the right, it takes a little bit of equipment and a little bit of coordination, but it can be done. Now, do you need to have the big giant radio? No. Here in the city, this works more, I mean, one of these works amazingly well, and this works amazingly better, because not only can you put this on a pie plate and stick it out on your back deck, patio table, broom handle to get it up a little bit higher. If you've got a vehicle that's not an aluminum vehicle, because aluminum F-150s, the magnet won't work on, but you can put that on your vehicle, and now you've got kind of a mobile command center for your team organization in your neighborhood. So No, this is nowhere near. The charger is. Yeah, this actually has, well, not this one. They do have a USB-C charger for the battery. Yep. And I've got some handouts that talk about the different radios. I didn't want to put too much out there. If you guys have or want that information, let me know. I've got a folder back here, and I can give you some more information on that. But again, that's your basics kind of on the radio. That's why if you flip back to the map, and let's say, let's go Mountain Park, right? So Mountain Park, what's the number underneath Mountain Park? 5-20, so channel 5 on the FRS radio with the privacy code of 20, right? So use that within your neighborhood. It's perfect, right? Now if you want to talk with somebody, say in Oak Creek or Westlake or Holly Orchard, now if you notice in the upper left that says Northwest Division, and there's a 22-20, right? So think about that power chart. Channel 22, we can use a 50-watt radio. And when we go radio to radio, it's what we call simplex. We're not using a repeater. So simplex is radio to radio. So you can communicate, and we've done testing. I mean, I think just in Palisades Neighborhood Association, and you'll see on Palisades there's an east and a west. Well, there's a reason there's an east and a west, because of terrain. You can't talk from one side of Palisades to the other side of Palisades very easily. So that was kind of why we did that. But now if you notice those divisions, there's another radio channel. So if you have somebody that you want to talk to the other neighborhood associations, you have a channel that's dedicated just for that. And that's, again, kind of the Northwest Division. And like I said, we've done all kinds of radio training classes, how to use the radios. This is anybody watch the Artemis mission return the other day? And I had to laugh because they're having communications problems. Well, what are they in? They're in a metal box, right? And one of the folks from Mission Control said, "Are you pushing and holding the PTT button?" That's this button here. 3 of the 4 astronauts are licensed ham radio operators, so I'm sure they were probably pressing the PTT button. But it, you know, it is kind of one of those things that, you know, one of those radio things we kind of look at. We're like, oh, it happens everywhere, right? It happens everywhere. But we've done classes on how to use a radio. You know, basically, I mean, everybody here has probably been on a Zoom meeting or a WebEx meeting or, you know, some other online meeting, and you always have what? A host. In the radio world, we have what we call a net controller, right? So if we get multiple people on a radio, again, who gets to talk? Only one person at a time. It's usually the person with the most powerful radio, unless we organize it. And we organize it by saying, hey, I'm going to be the net controller. I've got net control. All communications will go through me. So if you want to talk, you get a hold of me and I'll give you permission to talk, because I might have some other higher priority things that I'm trying to manage. And I don't need to worry about, yes, it's important to some, their dog has run off and is lost, but I've got other folks over here that are injured or hurt. Probably the best, most recent situation was the hurricane in North Carolina, where there was a radio operator. He was actually former law enforcement, former dispatcher, and he jumped on one of the local repeaters and like, hey, I'm here if anybody needs help. And all of a sudden I think it was like 12 hours where he was helping folks. You know, folks were like, hey, we've got, not to be graphic, but I think one of them they were talking about, we've got victims that are in a tree, though they weren't necessarily victims, but they're trying to report stuff, and he's collecting it, and then they moved them to the EOC, and then they moved them out of the EOC, but he really did an amazing job of communicating and setting up the communications of, okay, how does this stuff, how are we going to prioritize things? And that's one of the things that you would do is a couple of people talking back and forth, no problem. You don't need to use like fancy jargon or 10 codes or any, no, there's no 10-4 good buddy. Hey, this is David. I have an FRS radio, so I don't need to identify myself. I don't need to use my call sign. Hey, this is David. I'm at the Lake Oswego Library. Is anybody monitoring? Right? And somebody might answer, yeah, hey, I'm here. Oh, hey, where are you located? Well, I'm over by the fire station. Oh, okay, great. I've been out, walked around the neighborhood. I got some power lines and stuff down. We don't have any power. How about you, right? And we're just chit-chatting. We're sharing information. And then somebody else might jump in. 3 people, you have a little talk. Get to 4, yeah, maybe we need to say, hey, I was the first one here. I've got, good experience. I'm gonna assume control, net control. I'll be the net control. All communication goes through me, and then we'll just kind of work through things. And then you might just stop and say, hey, we're going to be done. Hey, let's all turn our radios on in an hour. Right? So it is kind of one of those things. Now, the one thing that I will share, and what do I have till 6:30? Okay, because I do have the communication and I've got the storage issue, so I am going to turn this on. So the one thing I do want to share is with this particular FRS radio, and the way that the, let's see if I can turn that up a little bit. There we go. The way that the GMRS, remember I said they share radio frequencies? And a repeater has an input and an output, okay? So when we key up and we talk on a GMRS capable radio, this radio is going to transmit, it's not on the right channel, here we go. Well, let's see if I can do this one here. No, that one's not gonna work. That's a ham radio. Again, it looks exactly like it, but what will happen is this radio will transmit on one frequency, goes into the repeater, comes out on another. Well, the repeater.
Welcome to the Lake Oswego GMRS repeater, WR8697.
So that's the repeater. What radio was it on? The FRS radio. So the output of the repeater you can hear on an FRS radio. You just can't talk to the repeater with this. So you may hear people talking and you're like, hey, can you hear? They can't hear you. This is not a GMRS capable repeater. Now, the cool part is that the coverage, I said on the GMRS repeaters, pretty broad, right? I mean, it covers, there's folks in Camas, Washougal, Hillsboro, that every Monday night at 7 p.m. since, I think, April of 2022, we hold a net. It's a radio net. It's a check-in net. Monday night, 7 p.m. channel 17, with your FRS radio, and you can listen to all of the folks check in. So if they are talking about things around the community, you can hear it with an FRS radio. So I always tell folks, don't rush out and go, oh, I got to have this cool radio. These are more than adequate. They're fine. You know, again, just understand what are you hoping to do. I have a lot of folks that reach out like, well, I want to talk with my family over in Gresham. Yeah, we're going to have to probably go to this, and everybody's going to have to take a test and get a ham license, which actually isn't that bad. I've done it myself. If I can do it, you all can do it. But anyways, all right. So that's kind of, like I said, the comms and the communications. Like I said, FRS, GMRS, the ham radio folks, they were here last week. You know, we've done a lot of stuff with them as well. The other thing, we'll get back to the storage, because storage is hard, right? So here's 72 hours. Emergency kit. Now, do you have to have these fancy pouches? No. If you go to the store and you buy a case of water, right, and you kind of put it at the bottom of the closet, and you kind of have some other stuff, and then maybe after 3 or 4 months, right, you get another one, put that one on the bottom. It's kind of the old, you know, it's kind of like going into the grocery store. They're putting the older stock in the front. Then you kind of use up the newer stuff. You don't have to go through, you know, and buy, like, you don't have to have a fancy bag like this. You know, I've got another small pouch. Where did I put it? I think I left it over here, but it's just a small pouch. You know, it doesn't have to be fancy. You know, you can think about, okay, what do I need for supplies? Well, if you go into your cabinet right now, do you have a can of soup that's probably the expiration date might be a little bit? Yeah, you know, I know, periodically I'm like, oh goodness, yeah, you know, but there's things that you can do to prepare to be 2 weeks ready. You know, it's kind of like, but you have to understand, if I'm storing this stuff, you don't have to buy specific just for an emergency. If you just modify the inventory that you have for your daily living and just purchase a little bit more each time, right? Just realize, though, how am I going to get that prepared when I do need it? Can of tuna fish is great, right? You just squeeze out the water or the oil, and you can eat the tuna fish. You don't have to mix it, don't have to heat it, you know, you can if you've got other stuff to mix it with. But just think about, if I have soup, how am I going to heat it up, right? Do you go camping? And if you go camping, do I have camping supplies, right? Maybe instead of having 2 canisters, maybe I have 4 or 5, right? So I think that's kind of one of those things. Now, when we start talking about HOAs and apartments, I always encourage them to reach out, and it's hard, especially in apartments where you've got a lot of transient activity. You know, you've got folks that are there for a few months and they're gone. You've got other folks that have been there for years. And then you got apartment manager, and they're like, yeah, we can help, and we can have some stuff here, because they probably have had a personal experience, and they're willing to maybe go a little bit above and beyond what their company has probably said they can do. And then they move on to another property, somebody else comes in, and they're like, yeah, no, I don't care about any of that. You know, we shouldn't have any of that here. That is the challenge that we've had, or the thing that I've seen. And that's really, I think it's just one of those things. Your biggest priority, time of natural disaster, it is a time to be selfish. Take care of yourself, right? Take care of your family, and then take care of your neighbors and so forth. So that's kind of the key message is, what can you do for yourself to be prepared? And again, it's just kind of look at, hey, these are the supplies I have. Definitely connect with the folks with Prep LO. They've been doing a lot of work on Be 2 Weeks Ready. And, you know, there's a lot of material that's available from Oregon Office of Emergency Management. Oregon State Fire Marshal's office has a lot of stuff on the Be 2 Weeks Ready, you know, and they can kind of help provide, you know, a little bit of, they've got some great lists. You know, honestly, I would just hand out their stuff. You know, when folks ask, I'm like, yeah, no, just use their stuff. They've already kind of gone through the key parts. So Prep LO is a group of local citizens that are interested in emergency preparedness. They meet, I think, monthly, or they try to meet monthly. I know they do have a website that has probably their meeting information, and it's basically emergency preparedness. You know, they kind of The one thing with our CERT program, I'm just recognizing the time here, is a lot of communities, they train the CERT, folks that go through the CERT program, and then they have volunteer teams, and then the organizer or the sponsor, in that case like the city, they do all kinds of events like Woodburn. They use their CERT volunteers for different events, Hoodland, and they'll use them during flooding events and things. We don't have a volunteer program, so we train and release. And we kind of do the training. We're like, okay, go do the best you can. We do some refresher training. Prep LO has kind of stepped in a little bit where our activities have kind of stopped, and then they kind of take it to the next level by helping the neighborhoods and the neighborhood associations with some of those finer details. That's what we call kerchunking. Somebody just keyed up their mic and let go. So that's not good. We don't want to do that. So anyways, any other last minute questions? Yeah.
Is there any way to tell how much is left in a canister? Because what I find when I'm backpacking or camping, I can't tell how much is left when I've been using it. So you can, damn, how much is it?
Oh, for the little propane cylinders, yeah. It's usually you have to look at when you've got your burner open wide, you look at the frost level, and the frost level will kind of tell you as it's changing from liquid to gas. That's about it. But yeah, that's the hard part.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's 72 hours for a single person.
Single person. Yep. Yep.
I mean, they say you need gallons.
Yeah. I mean, it's. Well, there's actually some more stuff in here. So, yeah. There's blocked food and MREs and a whole bunch of other stuff. But this is essentially our 72-hour kit.
For one.
For one.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a go bag.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Thank you very much.
Wasn't this great? Yeah, let's give him
Thank
a
you.
round of applause. And since Dave mentioned this, we've got Prep LO coming to talk with us on Wednesday, April 22nd.
Nice.
Same time, same station here. So join us for that if you're interested. We're also having tomorrow the second emergency water distribution demo. We've got Public Works. Cole Trustee comes to the pump station at 10th and C. It says ACC, but we had to move it to the pump station. It is fascinating to be able to see how we can do water distribution after that first 2 weeks. So distribute water from certain places to your community. So anyway, please join me for that. We'll have a tent up in case it's raining, and I'll have signage, so it'll be pretty easy to find. And I imagine Dave will hang around for just a few minutes if you have some specific questions. But again, thank you so much for coming, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem. Thanks for coming. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So my wife and I are both hands,
Okay.
but I haven't been practicing for many years.
Have we met at the emergency prep fair, right?
No,
No? Are you sure?
unless it was about 15 years ago.
Oh, all right.
But I'm gonna buy a new radio, but there isn't an FRS with a ham right now.
No, they're completely separate services. Yeah.
I was wondering if anybody's making anything would have that.
No, I mean,
Actually, the Russians are. I have a friend who owns a couple of those.
yeah. I mean, just